So I'm very, very happy to be talking to the Emirates News Agency. For us, COP28 will be a platform to continue with the business that we started in Sharm el-Sheikh. Sharm el-Sheikh was the implementation COP, was the Africa COP. It has identified a series of opportunities for us to accelerate climate action on the continent. We believe that in COP28 in the Emirates, we will be able to finish the unfinished business, to look at the opportunities to mobilize financing for climate action in Africa and learn from the experiences already from the Gulf countries and the Emirates in particular on how they are mainstreaming climate action in their efforts to diversify the economies. And what is very interesting about the Emirates is that the Emirates are, as you know, an export, very rich export dependent, or used to be a very rich export-dependent country where natural gas was a very key component of its economy. Today is a much more diversified and resilient economy with less vulnerabilities. Africa is still locked in economies that are essentially resource-dependent export economies. So we believe that collaboration between the Emirates and Africa to learn how to diversify the economies and with a pathway which is green, which is climate friendly, is what we believe COP27 could provide. So it is an opportunity for us to implement and accelerate climate action. It is about moving and taking the outcomes from COP27 to another level. We have, of course, from COP27 loss and damages. We need to discuss how can we indeed provide funding to support the implementation of that decision. So today here, by focusing on making carbon markets work for Africa, we are really taking into consideration the assets that the continent have in the form of forests, solar radiation, the blue economy, as a means to making sure that the value proposition of climate action becomes more tangible, much more easier to understand and to mobilize support from local communities, because revenues can be generated by translating climate action into sustainable development projects that can then be factored into developing alternative livelihoods to the communities that are affected today by climate change. So it is about discussing these issues. It is about demystifying this very complex issue about carbon markets and how to develop systems that can ensure that those that want to be active in the market trust what they are buying. So, and this, of course, because it's very complex, requires capacity development. In today's presidential session, starting by the very keynote addressed by the President of Malawi, we've set the parameters for how this could be done in a very efficient, in a very inclusive way on the continent. It's really about sharing experiences, is about benefiting from existing systems and platforms that were created during COP27 to make sure that Africa has the capacity, has the knowledge, and sells the opportunity that it offers in the form of its assets to the best possible buyer. And that process has to be just. It has to be based not on a race to the bottom, but instead on a race to the top.
It's very important to really stress that we are very encouraged by the fact that United Arab Emirates will be hosting COP28 right after COP27. It is also part of what we call should be a continuity. We make sure that COP28 is a continuity from what happened in Sharm el-Sheikh, where COP27 was actually labeled the African Cup. We believe that COP28 should also be the African Cup, given the proximity and the increasing volume of trade between Africa and the GCC country. You may know that just over the last year or two, the GCC became the top 5 African trading partner, perhaps even overtaking the US in that matter, in that regard. So it is very important that that COP28 of yours is also seen as the African Cup, because some of the challenges you're facing are also very similar to what we have in the African continent. I think from where you are sitting, as one economy which has actually been the best in terms of hydrocarbon, and what lesson can we learn as a continent, which has also been very rich in hydrocarbon, yet has not benefited as much as you have? I think there is room for South-South cooperations. And then second, some of the key issues which are fundamental to address the global climate injustice that we discussed, the issue of tech transfer, the issue of access to technology, should also be top on the agenda. It will benefit both the GCC countries, but also African countries. And naturally, the issue of financing is also critical. How do we make sure that we have the right financing? And finally, the market mechanism for really the carbon trading, the carbon market, is also something critical, because we believe at Afrexim Bank that it is really the most cost-effective solutions which will allow us to value the excess natural endowment that Africa has, its forest ecosystem, which has been the lung of the world without any benefit in return. We have to start really pricing that into the growth model and reduce the negative externalities, which have been very costly, as we all see now.